Hello, in this video I am going to show you how to implement form controls. So just a basic form example in Bootstrap 5. So a form is, like a submission form or a login form, for example. And here is what we're essentially going to be implementing. I'll be showing you most of it, but there's a bit more on the Bootstrap API guide. Plus this can get updated later on. So I recommend that you check this out. There will be a link to this in the description. So let's get to it. So it's very conventional that you put a form tag, and in there you put your form. The form tags would also have like a method and action as well, but because we're not really dealing with back-end technologies, just the front end in terms of the way it looks, we don't need that. So first of all, we're gonna have a div, and this is going to have a class of MB-3. So this is just adding a margin at the bottom just so it's easy to look at. Otherwise, all of the form, controls are on top of each other. Doesn't look very good. So this is going to be for, entering an email address, for example. And we're going to put a label first, label. And this is going to say for email address input, which will be the ID of the input that we'll be implementing shortly. This is going to have a class of form-label and not Laval, label. And now we're just going to say email address so the user knows what they need to insert here. And we're going to put an input tag now. This is where the user would actually be inputting something. And this is going to have a type of email. This is going to have a class of form control, and it's going to have an ID, which is exactly what we put here. And now I'm going to have a placeholder. It's going to say name at example.com. So the benefit of this is it shows the user what format essentially the content should be in. Obviously, yeah, we all know what an email address format is, but just in case, and it's just a good thing to have. Now let's actually implement the next control, which is very similar. We'll have a label, and this is going to be a description input. So this is, let's say if you was on a website's contact page and you had to put your email address in and maybe the description of your inquiry. Okay, so this is store form label. I'm gonna put description here instead. And for the input, it's slightly different. We're gonna use a text area, which just allows you to put multi, line text. And in HTML, that actually has its own component, its own element, which is text area. And we're not gonna put anything in between. So we want it to be empty. I'm gonna put a class of form control ID will match this right here, and we're going to put rows equals 3. So this way it has a size of 3 rows. You can expand it in the actual website. So this is what we get. As you can see, it is nicely responsive, so this will work great on a mobile device. And it says name at example, but if I click on it and I'll start typing, let's say bob at gmail.com, for example, that gets rid of that placeholder, and we can start typing. We're not restricted to 3 rows, it's just the size was 3 rows. Anything more than that you gets clipped, but you can extend it like so. So that is a basic example. Now let me show you how to deal with sizing inside of this. So I'm going to duplicate this, and honestly what I'm going to do is get rid of this and I get rid of the label, just because this isn't enough to do a basic example anymore. It's just about sizing. And I get rid of the ID as well. You would usually have an ID, but we don't need it for essentially what we're trying to demonstrate here. And ooh, that messed up a bit. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna put some there. I'm also gonna put a break rule just because if I don't, they're literally on top of each other. Doesn't look very nice. But again, that's just formatting. You could put an MB, -3 on, this class as well. So if we want the form control to be large, you just put an extra class of form-control-lg. If you want it to be medium, you just leave it. You don't actually add any extra class. That's what it is by default. And if you want it to be small, perform -control-sn. So if we reload, that's what we get. So this is what we have by default, but if you want it smaller or larger, you can easily do that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is how to make a form control read only. So let me duplicate this. And in here, I will get rid of virtually all of it. Don't really need the sizing, but you can leave it there. So if I wanted to make this read only, it's really simple. All you do is put the read only tag attribute like that. Reload, this is read only, and I cannot type in it. So why would you want a read only form control? Maybe the user can't input into that form control until they have triggered some other condition, and when that gets triggered, obviously you will be doing those checks in JavaScript. Then this becomes non-read only, and you would do again all of that in JavaScript. So that's it. I want you to do it that as a example that maybe a previous form control needs to be filled in X amount of characters. Do that in JavaScript, the checks, and once that is, this goes to not read only anymore, and you can put stuff in there, and vice versa. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop me a message, and as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hello, in this video I am going to show you how to implement the select form control. So the select form control is this. It's a drop down. They call it select in form, but if you're using it outside, for example, like the console will be called a drop down. So essentially a drop down is select as well, because it allows you to select an item. So we've got this basic form already here. If you haven't watched the form control video, highly recommend that you check that out. Okay, so to implement a select, it is super simple. So first of all, we're going to have one of these, just so it's better with formatting. If we were to add another component below, and we're going to put a select tag, and this is going to have a class of form-select area-label, and I'm going to put superhero select. So this is going to allow us to select our favorite superhero, and inside of here you always want, generally speaking, you always want an option that's selected. You always want that, and also you should always have like the first option, something like choose a superhero. So it's basically informing the user what they need to do with this checkbox, and thus it conveys what the actual purpose of the checkbox is. And then you would actually put all your options. So option, and you put a value, just put value like 1, and this will correspond to what we are choosing. So if we was to submit this form via a button, for example, in JavaScript, you could check form, this form, you could put an ID, get the option that's been selected, get the value, and maybe 1 corresponds with Batman, for example. Let me just duplicate this. I'll have a total of 3 options, but you can have as many as you want. This, let's say 2 corresponds with Superman, and a 3 corresponds with Yoda. So this is just for our, almost like our checks, not for the user. All they see is this, like so. And as you can see, it is fully responsive as well. So that's it. That is how you implement a select. There's a few more features like sizing that you can mess around with. I highly recommend that you do. There will be a link to this in the description, this particular page on the Bootstrap website. If you have any questions, feel free to pop me a message. And as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hello, in this video I am going to show you how to implement checks. So that's what they're called in Bootstrap, checks in forms. They're basically checkboxes, radio boxes, those sort of selection items. So I would provide a link to the Bootstrap API guide where you can see all the different features. I will cover the basic features and everything that you generally need to get going. And this is what check is. They call it a check, but you probably know it as a checkbox, and you got radio buttons as well. So I will show you a fair bit of this functionality. So let's just get straight to it. I'm already using the code from a previous video. You could have an empty form, does not matter. Okay, so I am gonna just copy this and just delete the content. I'm basically just gonna be using this structure. So get rid of this. And I'm going to put a div class, and this is form dash check, and in here we need an input, and this is going to have a class of form dash check dash input. It's going to have a type, and this is going to be checkbox. We're going to have a value, and we're going to leave this empty, but maybe you want to assign some sort of value with it. It might be numerical, it might be string based, that when the user selects it, you could use something like JavaScript or jQuery to get that value. When they submit the form, depending on what's selected, they could get the value and store in a database, for example. So that is possible. So ID equals, I'm going to put checkbox 1. And there we go. Okay, so we're gonna put a label now, and this is just optional, but it's always good to have a label for a couple of reasons. One, it allows you to describe what that actual checkbox is for. Otherwise, the user's just literally seeing random labels, random checkboxes. And two, it allows this feature, which I'll show you in a second. So you want to put the same ID here, and I think this is really cool. And I'm just gonna put epic checkbox, but obviously feel free to make it more contextual. And one example is if you go onto a login page, below the email address and let's say the password field, you might have a remember me checkbox. So that's a great example. So I can click on it, enable it, disable it. But because I've done that for and linked it with the ID, if I click on the text, it also checks it as well. So that's a little great feature. You can also make you can make them disabled as well. So to make one of these disabled, it is really simple. You just put the disabled attribute. It is not equal to anything. Reload. That that is triggering that, and that is because I have not updated the for and the ID. So make sure you do that. I've made that mistake before, and you'll be triggering a previous element as it was there. So disabled checkbox. So if I reload now, it is all good, but we cannot select it. So maybe the user needs to do something else for that to become enabled. Next, what I'm going to show you is a radio box. I'm going to put a horizontal rule just to separate the radio box, because the radio buttons usually are sort of linked to each other. And so what we're going to do is have this. Actually, I'll have all of this because the code is pretty similar, to be fair. So I'll have this form check input. This will be now radio. We're gonna have a name, and we're gonna put for the name. I'll just put radio box 1. You can put whatever you want. This is what you would be using, when you submit the form to be able to get hold of it. Radio box 1. I'm gonna put I'm not gonna have any value, and we're gonna have radio box 1. Radio box 1. Don't want to make the disable, so we can leave that out. We're gonna have 1 checked by default. That's what you always want to do with a radio button. That's one of the unique things about a radio button is you'll have multiple. Only one of them can be selected at any given time. If you select one, the previously selected one will be not disabled, unchecked, and you generally have one always enabled at the start. And pretty common practice to make it the first one. So we'll put this as radio box 1, and I'm literally going to put radio box 1. Okay, so what we're going to do is duplicate the form check inside of here, and we're going to change this to radio box 2, radio box 2. We only want one of them checked. Radio box 2, radio box 2. You generally will only probably have one of the one set of these in any given form. So if I save that, reload, here we go. So if I select that, as you can see, I can't deselect it. But if I select radio box 2, and okay, something has messed up. The name, needs to be the same. So I'm just gonna put radio box epic. There we go. So if I try and deselect it, doesn't work. If I select another one, you'll deselect whatever was previously selected. You can have as many as you want. So yeah, just make sure the name is the same for all of them. That's how it is linked, and that's how you could have separate, sort of sections of radio buttons. The last one I'm going to show you is the form switch, and I will put another horizontal rule just for formatting purposes, and I will copy this one, put it there. Form check, we also need a form switch as well. Form check input, that's all good. Type is checkbox. You can have a value if you want to. I'm going to put the ID as switch. I don't want it disabled, but you can put the disabled attribute there. And the only last thing I need to do here is put that switch and just optionally change this to switch text. If I reload, we got this switch, and as you can see, there's a nice little animation. This is more akin to what you would see on mobile, especially this sort of design is very similar to what you see on iOS. And as you can see, it looks very good on all screen sizes. There are a lot more, different options that you can do. You can stack them, inline them. This is a pretty cool one. You can, toggle it, and the radio button, so single toggle like so. You can do that sort of stuff. There's quite a bit, but I've shown you the basics. If you have any questions, feel free to put me a message on Discord or any other way. All the links are in the description, plus a link to this webpage will also be there. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hello, in this video I am going to show you how to add the file selection component to your form. So it is basically like this. Allows you to browse and select a file for uploading. So this isn't a video on how to upload a file. That is something that you would want to link with JavaScript and link with backend technology like PHP or Python to upload the file, store it on a database, or store it somewhere else potentially. This is just the front end. You can couple it with that technology, and there's a lot of other videos out there. Feel free to ask me if you want any advice on that. But again, this is just front end. It's really simple to implement one of those forms. So I'm gonna have a class of MB3 just for formatting purposes. So it's just adding margin for the next set of components, and I'm gonna have a div. This is gonna have a class of form-file. And in here, we're going to have an input, as we always do. We are going to have a type of file. It's going to have a class of form-file-input ID equals custom file. Feel free to name this whatever you want relative to what you are meant to be uploading. It might be a video, it might be an image for an avatar, for example, or a thumbnail, whatever it is. I'm gonna add a label just to describe what this is, and this is basically what you would actually be clicking per se. And we're gonna put a class form dash file dash label 4 equals custom file, so make sure it matches this ID, and we are now inside of here going to put a span, and this is going to have a class of form dash file dash text, choose file, and then we are going to have a span which is going to be the button text class dash form dash file dash button, and this is going to be browse. Save that, reload, and there we go. If I click anywhere on it, like the browse or just there, this pops up, allows me to select a file. Again, that's something you would want to link with JavaScript and something like PHP, and then when you submit the form to be able to upload it. But again, feel free to have a look at that. This is just a very simple video of how to create the front end. If you have any questions, feel free to pop me a message, and as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next awesome video. Hello, in this video we are going to take a look at the range component for our form. So a range is basically a slider that allows you to select a value. So this is great if, for example, if you are selecting how many of something. Maybe you're creating a website where you can order items. Maybe the items are cans of tuna, and you can use a slider, and maybe there's a minimum obviously of 0 for the order, and maybe you only allow a maximum order of 100, for example. So this, that's one use case. Another use case is it could be used to toggle, let's say, the brightness of something, or anything really. So to do a range, it's actually really simple to implement. So first of all, I'll implement this div that will essentially encapsulate our component. This is optional, but it's just a great way of formatting things. And so the range, like I said, it is, I'd say, one of the simplest components that you can implement in a form, but still pretty cool. First of all, we're going to have a label, and this is just great to provide some contextual information. I'm going to put custom range 1. This is going to be the ID of the input range component, which we'll be creating shortly, and we're going to have a class of form dash label to keep it all consistent, and we're just going to say example range. Okay, so now what we're going to do is have an input, and the input is going to be a type of range. We're going to have a class of form dash range, and it's going to have an ID, and the ID will be this right here. Okay, but what I should say is this is the same as the ID, not the ID is that. It equates to the same thing. So if I reload, we get this range. So that's pretty cool. We can move this, got increments. We can also set a min and max value. So we could do min equals, let's say, 0, and max equals 10, like so. And there we go. As you can see, we can click somewhere, and you'll just go to the nearest one, whether that's going up one or slightly down from where we've clicked, but that's all it is. And we can also specify a step as well. So the step just basically indicates, the intervals. So if I go to the start, it's 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And because the last one is 10 because we have a max of 10. If I did a step of 2, but I did 100 now, there'll technically be 50 different steps, but each one increasing it by 2. You can obviously use JavaScript to get the value of this range, and I highly recommend that you do that as an extra task. One other thing I want to show you is by default it puts it in the center, or as close to the center that it can, depending on what the the step range is. To eliminate that, so if you want to add a particular point, let's say at the start, which is very common, you just put value equals 0, which will be at the start now. There you go. So that is ranges, basically a slider. If you have any questions, feel free to pop me a message. And as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hello, in this video I am going to show you input groups. So what I'll do is I'll provide a link to the input group API guide page from Bootstrap where you can see all of the different variants that you can do, and I'm sure you can probably make some extra up as well, and all the other different features of it. I will show you a basic one and that will give you a rough idea of what it is. Okay, so we have these, all of these are some form of input. And you see this input here, regular input, it's text. So this is just a text field. This is a text area, allows multi-line stuff. But what we can do is, it's best if I show you because it is pretty darn cool what you can achieve. So we're gonna have a div, and this is gonna have a class of input group and mb-3. In here, we're gonna first of all have an input, and this is going to have a type of text, and then class is going to be form dash control, and we're going to have a placeholder of recipient's username. All of this will make sense shortly. And we're going to have an area dash label equal recipient's username, and I'm gonna have say area dash described by, and this is, we're gonna say input group 1. We'll use this as the ID of the span, which we are literally creating right now. This is going to have a class of input dash group dash text, and I'm going to have an ID. This is going to be this, and in here I'm just going to say epic at epicwebsite.com. So you might be thinking, what does that produce? It produces this. So imagine if you are, have some sort of registration form, and you are essentially creating an email address as well. Maybe this is your website. You could do something like this. It's going to be at whatever your website name is, .com.co.uk, whatever. So in this case, in this example, it's at epicwebsite.com. Then you could do something like Farhan, and so that would correspond to being Farhan at epicwebsite.com. You would obviously have to code this in JavaScript and then pass that into your backend technology like PHP or Python. But in terms of the front end, this is what you would do. If you look at the other input groups, there are other examples. There's an at one for something like a username, something to do with currency, for example, which is pretty cool. You can, do stuff where you're wrapping it as well. You can size it, so feel free to check that out. There's checkboxes and radio buttons as well. There's multiple inputs, which is pretty darn cool, and multiple add-ons. So I think this is a cool one, first and last name. So that way you can input it separately, because a lot of websites do want it separately. It's just easier to, manipulate the data. I don't mean in a malicious way, but just in general, for searching, for example. But you might want to show it, so you can see what it looks like, because you generally would have it next to each other. Then you can have multiple add-ons as well. It's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. So feel free to experiment, create your own custom stuff. If you have any questions or you get stuck, let me know. There will be a link to this and my Discord page and my website, so feel free to check that out. And as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hello, in this video we are going to cover laying out your form. So it's obviously already laid out by default, but everything is just sequentially after each other, so it's on top of each other. You might want to organize it using the amazing Bootstrap column system next to each other, whether you want two components next to each other, 3, 4, doesn't really matter. Obviously always consider you don't want too many, because depending on the screen size and in general it can just not look too good. But again, that's personal preference and what size of the what size each item is. There's various ways that you can implement you know, the layout system, and they're all covered here. You know, horizontal form. There's using sizing, auto sizing. The auto sizing is pretty cool as well. I will provide a link to this in the description so you can check that out. And but we're just going to use a basic example. So essentially what I want to do is these two checkboxes, I want to put them on the same line. So if we go here, the checkboxes are right here. So these are the checkboxes. In reality, to do that, what we should be doing is sort of just changing everything else. So we don't want this in a row anymore, and we don't want it in a column anymore. So that is a defunct way of doing this. And let's just sort out the indentation while we're here. Wrong one. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so indentation is sorted. On the form itself, we want a class of row, and on all of these component, you know, form component, you know, divs, this is where we want our columns. So I'm going to put col-12 for all of them for now, just because we're going to have them, you know, all on top of each other. But I will show you what we're going to be doing with the checkboxes momentarily. Okay, so if we save that, refresh, this is what we get so far. So let's put these on, you know, next to each other. And what we actually need to do for this, once I find it, is just like so. We can get rid of this MB3. We do not need that anymore. And get rid of this here. There we go. It is on top of each other now. You can add a bit of styling to, let's say, the last one, or, you know, to this horizontal. You might also notice the horizontal rule is a bit wider. It's because we need to put a div. I will, because it's literally just a very simple, you know, element. I will put it all on one line, and I'm going to put a class of col-12. Save that, refresh. As you can see, this has now fixed, and it's looking a lot nicer now. This we need to also fix. So we'll just copy this, paste it here, save, refresh. There we go. It is all looking great now. So that is all you have to do, and you can add as many as you want. What I want you to do as an extra task is put a couple more of these regular sort of text fields, and maybe a first name, username, and let's say first name, middle name, and username, and have them all on the same line. So that's a little task for you. If you have any questions, feel free to pop me a message on Discord or on my website, songnotlearning.co.uk. You know, plus all the other ways that you can contact me is in the description, and I will provide a link to, the Bootstrap page so you can check out all of the different features. That's it. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hello, in this video we are going to take a look at implementing validation in Bootstrap forms. So I will provide a link to the official Bootstrap page which shows you all the different ways of doing validation. So a lot of cool different ways. I will cover the basics, and it'll be a good foundation for you to proceed. So far we don't even have a submit button. So let's do that as one of the first tasks. And let's add a div class col-12. You can add any sort of button style you want. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to have a button tag. I'm going to have a class of btn danger. Again, that's just for the styling. I'm gonna have a type which is submit, and I'm gonna have the text submitted here. So if I reload, we get this. If I click it, you might be able to briefly see the web if you look here. the website is, just a little bit, reloading, because it is going to go to the top of the form. There's no action here. If there was an action, we could specify what where we want to go to. If we don't specify, it just submits back to this page. You would obviously use backend technology like PHP or Python to actually get that data and do something with it. But this is just about the front end stuff. So let's say we want the email address to be a mandatory field. So on all input, whether it's this, whether it's this, whatever it is, anything that's mandatory, put required, like so. And I'm also gonna have this mandatory down here. So again, it is totally up to you what you choose to be mandatory. This is what we're using. So if I click submit, we get this now. So if I was to try and do this, it says needs to include an email address. The reason it says that is because the type is email, so that's just a browser default check. So let me go with that, click submit. This now says none of this is moaning because these aren't required. If I put something in here, this just needs to have some characters. It lets me submit it. Obviously you can use JavaScript to get that data, you can use PHP to get it, you can validate in client side, always validating server side as well. So that's just the browser default validation. You can also do some extra validation, which allows, not extra validation, I should say, alternative validation, and show you, a different style. So what we are going to do is show you, or I'm going to show you how to put custom feedback. So if I put a div, we're going to put class invalid feedback. We can put valid feedback as well, so feel free to check that out on the Bootstrap website for more information. And in here, I'm going to say incorrect email address, and I'll also do it for this one, incorrect username. Okay, so currently, if I was to try and submit, it still does the browser default. So there's a couple of more things that we need to do. We need to add some data here, and what we are going to do is add a class of needs-validation. Then I'm going to say no validate. Now let's see what it does. If I reload, click this, nothing is appearing now. So the reason for that is we need to actually sort of set this up in JavaScript. So we need to initiate all of this stuff. So we're going to put a script tag. If you have a separate JavaScript file, feel free to actually use that one to put your code in to keep it nice and tidy. This is a very simple page, so I'm putting it all on the same page. Okay, so var form. So we are going to get any form on the page using query selector all. Based on the class, it is this class here, needs validation. So if I copy that, and you need to put a dot to indicate what you are checking is for a class. Then I'm going to say array.prototype.slice.call, and on all the forms we're going to say for each one we're going to essentially call this method on each of them. There's going to be the form in here, so this is the individual thing from the array. This is the way I like to format these arrays. And in here we're going to say form. So this is each individual form. In our case there's only one, but this just ensures in case there's multiple, which is more than possible. .add event listener, and the event listener is going to be submit. So when it has been submitted, we're going to call this function now with event. So this is just the default event that is happening. And in here we're going to say event.preventDefault, which is submitting it. Event.stop propagation, just to stop the touch event, the submission event going down in case there's stuff below it. And we're also not in here, sorry. This is meant to be in an if statement, my bad. So if the form isn't valid, check validity, yeah, that is spelled correctly. If it's not valid, only then would we want to prevent the default and stop the propagation. Otherwise we would continue with submitting to whatever action has been implemented. Next we're going to say form.classList.add was -validated semicolon, and in here the form we're gonna say false, like so, and that should be all good to go. Reload, click that, there we go. Anything else, because it doesn't require data, they automatically are succeeded. But now we get this error, incorrect email address. We can obviously format this however we want to. I'll put something in here, still it's not valid. So if I do that, now it is valid, and as long as I put something in here, we're all good and we can submit it. So that is it for validation. Like I said, there is a lot more information on the Bootstrap website. Feel free to go over this and have a look. If you have any questions, feel free to pop me a message on Discord, on my website, or social media. All links and everything is in the description and on the channel. And I look forward to seeing you in the next awesome video.